from our YouTube channel. Today, what we're going to be discussing is the dirt that we're putting in our indoor garden bed. One of the big things that I've been researching lately is growing mediums, specifically for potted plants. What is going to be the best growing medium to replicate what they're going to grow in outside? Now, a lot of people will say that it's a great idea to grow in compost, a 50-50 mixture of compost. From all the research I've been doing, it points to that that's going to kill a lot of things that grow in this bed if I put 50-50 compost mix in here, because plants don't want to grow in compost. Compost is plant food. It is going to sit on top of the soil and trickle down into the soil. Well, that eliminates compost that we're going to put in here as far as what we're filling this with. What plants want to grow in is inert minerals. And by inert minerals, I mean they don't have anything in them that inherently feeds the plants, because they're going to get that from fertilizers such as compost or inorganic fertilizers or chemical fertilizers that we're going to put in here to feed them, depending on what way of gardening you're going to go. I personally like to go organic, so that changes things just a little bit, but we'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. Now, there are three major components to this mix that I have in here right now. It's currently about a 35% sand, 35% sphagnum peat moss, about 25% perlite, and 5% charcoal. Now, I did not come up with this mix myself. It's adapted from a recipe that I found from a guy in Laguna Hills, California called Gary Matsuako. And you can find him on YouTube at Gary's Best Gardening. And his mix that he uses is very similar to this, but I've incorporated a bit more sand into it than he would have, because he said that sand adds a lot of weight to it. But sand is actually a really good growing medium, and you can actually start seedlings in sand and they'll grow just fine. And I've got plenty of proof to show you that if you want me to show you starting seeds in sand. It does work. So we want this because this is going to be very draining, very compact, very aerated, and it's going to provide the right structure we need to grow plants in. You don't need to get real fancy when it comes to this. You could really just mix up a 50-50 mixture of perlite and peat moss and it would be just fine. However, I find that it gets a little bit more dense and provides a little bit more structure for the plants if you add in at least 25% sand into the mixture. The charcoal is really just to give it a little bit more nutrient retention. And if you look at anywhere in nature that charcoal is, plants grow like crazy because it holds on to the nutrients that they need and they can absorb nutrients from it. One thing that you'll need to be very aware of, and I mean very aware of, I've spent the last 2 weeks trying to get over this, is you're going to need a face covering. None of us should be a stranger to this at this point in our lives. To cover your face and nose, really a rebreather mask that you can get with filters on the sides of it is going to be the best bet. But you're going to need to use some type of a filtration system over your face when you're mixing perlite and charcoal specifically, because the fine dust can get into your lungs, as you can hear, and it's going to cause you a lot of respiratory issues in your sinuses and in your upper chest, and could lead to you getting pneumonia or bronchitis. So please, if you're going to use perlite and you're going to use charcoal dust in this mixture, make sure you use the right safety precaution. With that, I'm going to go ahead and finish mixing my stuff up over the next 12 to 18 hours and get it put in this bed. So I'll see you at the end of that. I have to say, filling this garden bed took a lot longer than what I imagined it would. You're going to need a lot of perlite, a lot of sphagnum peat moss, and a lot of sand to fill this up. I'm pretty sure it was about 6 bags of sand, a huge, like 3.5 cubic foot bag of perlite, and about one of those huge bricks of sphagnum peat moss that you can get at your local hardware store. As you can see, I've gone ahead and left it about 3 inches from the top of filling this up. And the reason for that is I don't plan on messing with this a whole lot year after year with planting it and planting things in it and cycling things through. I want to leave this as pure as possible, and I'm going to be adding compost season after season as I grow in here, and that's going to build up a layer on top that's eventually going to end up filling this up. And then I can come back and kind of mix that in as it loses its toxicity and turns into more soil. As the microbes break it down, it will become a better top layer to grow plants in. Now, I've already gone ahead and done it, but what you're going to need to do is go ahead and wet this all down. And I would actually recommend wetting it down layer by layer as you're doing this, so that it makes sure that you have the moisture content throughout it. And you're going to want to constantly wet this at least once every couple of days to make sure that the moisture stays in there, because peat moss, when it dries out, has a tendency to actually resist moisture, and you'll get moisture lock if you let this dry out. A couple of tips on this. Perlite you can purchase from a garden center. It's kind of expensive, but if you get it in larger quantities, if you can find a hydroponic store or anything near you, you can get a larger amount of perlite, like a 3.5 cubic foot bag of perlite, for much cheaper, around $40 to $50 most of the time, than you would if you purchased it in the little half cubic foot bags that you find at the store. If you're planning on making this in much smaller increments, then that'd be fine. But honestly, like, that is the easiest way to save money on perlite, is to not get it shipped to you, but to find it locally. Shipping is very expensive because it's bulky. Even though it doesn't weigh a lot, it's very bulky. The second tip I would give you to save money is to just use a natural charcoal that you can find at the store. It'll say something like natural charcoal bricks or things of that nature. They usually look like pieces of wood that have just been turned into charcoal, obviously. And use a brick or something and put it inside a bag and actually smash it up yourself and put it in there. It's okay to have some big chunks of charcoal in here like this. That's fine. Really, the plants will seek out where the nutrients are and be able to latch onto it. But you're gonna coincidentally get a lot of charcoal dust in there as well. If you buy charcoal dust, it's going to be insanely expensive. But make sure that whatever you're using for a charcoal is a natural charcoal and not a manufactured charcoal. You don't want the ones that look like charcoal briquettes. You want a natural hardwood charcoal to mix into here. And that's actually going to save you quite a bit of money doing that legwork yourself if you like doing do-it-yourself projects. If money's not an issue for you, just buy the pre-ground charcoal. But again, if you're going to use ground charcoal or the other type of charcoal that you make yourself, please make sure you wear a mask with perlite and charcoal, as both of them can be very dangerous to your lungs. Third tip, before I forget, you can pretty much use any type of sand. You could go buy the cement mixer sand for concrete grade. It has a lot of rocks and small pebbles and stuff in it, which is fine. It provides, it's basically river sand, and it's going to provide the same amount of aeration and drainage and structure either way. Or you can just use play sand. It doesn't really matter either way. Sand is pretty much sand. You just really don't want to get sand from the ocean because it's very different. It doesn't have the same breakdown of components as river sand does, which is what play sand and construction sand is going to be. Ocean sand has a lot of seashells and stuff in it that's broken down, and it just doesn't do quite the same thing as river sand does. And the fourth and final tip is for your peat moss, make sure you pre-soak it so that it expands and actually soaks in the water. You can do that anywhere from about 10 to 20 minutes to overnight if you feel the need to. The bigger quantities of peat moss that you get, the better the cost is going to be. And that's just the easiest way to make sure that your peat moss actually retains the moisture that it's supposed to and does what it is supposed to do in retaining moisture, is to pre-soak it and let it expand before you put it in something like this. If you put dry peat moss in here, it is going to take you a long time to get water into it because it's going to actually resist water, and it sometimes helps to actually add a little bit, like a couple of drops of soap, into whatever water you're using to break that barrier and allow the peat moss to actually soak up the water better. I might actually do an instructional video on how to do that at a later time. So I want to thank you for watching this. The next video that we do in this series, I'm going to be laying out exactly how to plan a bed like this to make sure that you don't overgrow in it, and to make sure that we space the plants and stuff out far enough in here to be able to maximize the use of this in an indoor setting. Until next time, God bless you, and thanks for watching.